Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Exade Replay, coming to you with episode 42 of the series. Let's get right into it. I don't know about you guys watching, but I'm getting really nervous. There's only 3 episodes left after this one, and there's a lot to take in, so let's go ahead and get into what began at the beginning of the episode, which is the advent of Game Deus. So yes, at the top of the show, we see that Game Deus has spread its virus everywhere. Apparently at the end of last episode, when it showed up on the field with the other common riders, it spread its virus everywhere, meaning everyone in the general metropolitan Tokyo area has been infected with the virus, and they're all flooding into the CR, into the nearest hospital they can find, and there is no apparent cure. Now this is good, since we're getting to the end of the series, we need a threat. We need something that shows everybody's in danger, which is why we need the common riders right now. Now admittedly, they're doing everything they can to treat people, but of course it's only treating symptoms. The real cause, Game Deus, has to be taken out in battle. Before we get into the 2 major fights that we have in this episode, I want to go ahead and talk about a guest star that we had. This, of course, being the mom that brought her kid into the CR, both of them showing symptoms of the game virus. This, of course, is actress Miyu Sawai, who is most famously known for playing Sailor Moon in the Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon live-action series. Now, she's also been in other Kamen Rider series, such as Wizard, Amazons, and now Exade, so it's nice to see her showing up again in Tokusatsu. Now, as I said, we have 2 major fights in this episode. Both of them pretty much take up the bulk of the whole episode. They're extended fights, really meaning to show how we're moving the plot along. The first major fight is, of course, Game Deus versus Paradox and Exade. Now, the 2 of them are doing everything they can to go ahead and combat Game Deus, but of course, like any end boss, he does have all of the attributed powers of the earlier bugsters that they've already dealt with, like Alhambra, of course, like Graphite, who we just saw defeated last week, so they're having a kind of hard time with it. Now, admittedly, they don't have a strategy, they just know that they have to combat him. Really, the key to defeating Game Deus lies in the other fight. Now, if this series has 2 fan-favorite characters, it's definitely Laser and Genmu. It's definitely Kiriya and Kuroto-dan. Now, the 2 of them, in a weird way, have to work together to solve this problem. So the interesting thing here is that they're coming at this from both the idea of doctors and gamers. So the idea here that Kiriya comes up with is that he needs to go ahead and help out Emu as best he can, given everything that's been happening to him. And he tells Kuroto that he's having to deal with this new life he's been given, mainly because of Kuroto, now that he's a bugster. Now, thinking of this in terms of his original occupation, medical examiner, he figures the best thing to do is operate or observe a dead body. Since bugsters are essentially dead bodies, that makes perfect sense. So from a logical doctor standpoint, that's how he's coming into this next battle. But beyond that, it makes sense that as a gamer, you kind of have to grind, and they're definitely going to have to grind to get the answer to this problem, Game Deus' virus. So what it breaks down to is essentially this. He's going to go ahead and infect Genmu, infect Kuroto-dan with a strain of the Game Deus virus, and he's going to infect him over and over again to see if he does develop an antibody. Now that makes sense observing Graphite, how he was able to develop an antibody to Game Deus, given that he had several episodes to get over it, even with the reset. Now the beautiful part about this is the way that it's displayed. Not only is Kiriya getting out all of his anxiety, all of his frustration, all of his feelings towards Kuroto-dan, since essentially he's the reason that he became a bugster in the first place, but it's also driving the plot forward. They need to have this fight. There needs to be a winner, which is why there's stakes on both ends. They're both infected by the end of the fight, and the way the fight is shown is so knocked down, drag out. I absolutely love it. I appreciate it when it's not just Exade and Paradox getting the best choreography. Here, there's plenty of great choreography to be had between the 2 of them, just simply going at it. I loved it, loved every second of it. Now, Kiriya is really the driving force behind this. On the other hand of that is, of course, Kuroto-dan. Now, Kuroto-dan doesn't really care about anybody else, but he does care about his status as the god of gaming, as he puts it to himself. So he sees that he has to go ahead and try and compete against Kiriya to be the top person in this fight, because no matter what, he wants to be on top, which is what pushes him further and further to losing as many lives as possible, at one point 50, all the way down to 5. Now, what we've been told about how this correlates to True Ending is that apparently True Ending, the movie that just came out there in Japan for Exade, takes place a full year after the events of the series, so this might be our explanation as to why Kuroto-dan only has 1 life in that movie, but here he's down to essentially 4 since he lost that 5th life as well. Now, before we get to how that fight ended, let's go ahead and talk about how everybody else is doing back over at the CR. So we see that Saiba Nico and Taiga are doing their best to try and help out Hiro and the other doctors and nurses there at the hospital, try to comfort everybody. Now, I do think it's interesting that they're trying to show Saiba Nico as being more empathetic sympathetic towards somebody who's had Game Deus' strain of the virus since she already had it and was cured of it a couple episodes back. So here we see that she's trying to tend to the child that was brought in earlier with his mom, and we see that Poppy actually comments on that, like, hey, you might be actually good at this. Now, is this a hint that Saiba Nico could eventually become a nurse or a doctor at some point? Who knows? At this point, it's kind of moot to bring up since we've pretty much gone through all of Saiba Nico's arc a couple of episodes back. Do I think they're going to flesh this out? Probably not. I think it's just a throwaway line just to get through this episode. Now, of course, back to the other fight, Eggzade and Paradox are doing everything they can against Game Deus, but unless they can shut him down at a core level, it's never going to work, which is why it's good that Kiriya and Genmu actually got what they needed to. Thankfully, at the conclusion of that fight between Kuroto-dan and Kiriya, we did get the help that we need in the form of a new Gashot called Dr. Mighty Double X. Now, this is a Gashot that is not intended for transformation. This is mainly meant as an antibody for the Game Deus strain of the virus. So once Eggzade is able to load this into the Gashokon Key Slasher, he's able to go ahead and hit Game Deus and eliminate that problem. Now, I do want to go ahead and talk about what happened at the end of the episode because it's kind of a page-turner there, but I think it's very interesting to see that we saw Kiriya basically riding himself, because as we remember at the beginning of the series, level 3 for Kiriya meant he was the bike for Eggzade, or rather level 2 I should say. But the interesting thing is here, based off everything that we see happening, he's his own level 0 form, and he's got Shakariki sports on his shoulders, and he's riding his level 2 form, of course with no eyes since that would be creepy. It's weird, you know, bike on bike action, and I really do appreciate that they remember they had a bike in this series. It's just kind of odd to see it all in one person. But biking aside, they do manage to go ahead and stop Game Deus' virus from affecting everybody else, and now it looks like Paradox and Eggzade have exactly what they need to go ahead and stop him. Only, of course, we forgot, oh yeah, Masamune, he's got a troll, so that's exactly what he does. Now, Masamune, admittedly at the beginning of the episode, said that he had tampered with the Game Deus data, which makes sense as, like we said, he's been playing dirty for the last, 10-odd episodes. But here, he's taking it to a whole nother level. He can't bear to see Game Deus die at the hands of Eggzade and Paradox, so he takes matters into his own hands and defeats him himself. Now, the reason for that being so he can go ahead and collect the data of Game Deus and inject himself with it. Now, on a certain level, that's kind of cheap, but on another level, a gamer level, it makes sense that the final boss would have more than one form. And that makes sense since we're combining the power of the two most large villains that we've gotten in this series so far, Game Deus and Cronus. Now, I know I was wondering about 2 episodes back whether or not we would see Masamune become a bugster there with the use of Reset. Turns out I was a little early, it's this episode where he becomes a bugster. So apparently by injecting himself with Game Deus' strain, he's actually lost all sense of self. It's now Game Deus driving Masamune's body, and we're going to see how that plays out over the next episode or 2. Or 3, considering we're almost at the end of the series. And that next episode does look to be a doozy. Not only are we going to see every writer, except Poppy for some reason, fight Game Deus as best as we can, but we're actually going to see another person transform into Cronus. There's a pretty good idea who it is, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's next week. And of course, I don't want to get ahead of myself because we've only got 3 episodes left now. I've really fallen in love with this series. I love the way they've been telling the story. I love the way these characters have grown. I love the way every little bit comes together to make this nice, cohesive story that I was really worried about at the beginning. And I know I've said that several times, but I absolutely love this series. For any of you guys who are watching this and haven't actually watched the show, go watch the show. I highly recommend it. But of course, that's all of my thoughts. I want to hear what you guys thought. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So first I want to talk about who's the actual partner with Eggzade as the series has told its story. So initially we could have said that was Snipe or Brave, but here it looks to have been Paradox. So who do you think is best paired with Emu at this point? Secondly, Saiba Nico's future. Do you guys think she could eventually become a nurse or a doctor, or do you think she'll stick to her gaming roots? And third, what did you think about Kiriya's gamble? Did you think he was actually going to eliminate Kuroto-dan outright, or do you think he had a plan all along? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 42 of Eggzade Replay for episode 42 of the series, God Arrives. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.